Alrighty, we are back with Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. So I tried filming chapter 25, which is what we're on now. Now that I'm talking, they're going to start whining. Chapter 25, I tried filming it when I was outside of work, and I literally fell asleep in the middle of reading it. And I left it recording, and so I had to delete that whole thing. And then a couple days ago, I was going to film it again. I literally was about to sit down to do it, and my voice disappeared. And it's still having some trouble, but my voice just out of nowhere disappeared. I'm not sick, and my throat didn't hurt. My voice just ran away. So now we're a couple days later. And we're gonna try and do this again. Chapter 25. And my voice still is not perfect, so excuse me and how these voices are gonna go. You chased the cat. You are grounded. Don't whine about it. And here we go. Or are we? Un momento, por favor. Okie dokie. The garage was a massive space that housed 8 cars, all of which were personal vehicles, except for the extended van used to shuttle the residents to the Knock and back. Ari made her way to the open garage door where Val's path trailed out into the storm, which had turned the summer evening into an inky dusk. "The back gate is right out there," Soren said, pointing out towards the line of tall pine trees barely visible through the sheets of rain. The toes of Ari's new shoes were right at the edge of the pavement, where the cement of the garage floor stopped and the black asphalt of the driveway began. Ari realized as she stood here at this precipice that over the weeks of healing and respite that she'd spent here at Scion's Keep, she had essentially become agoraphobic. She was deathly afraid to leave. See, my voice is still having some trouble there. That's how my voice sounded when it disappeared. So I couldn't do anything. But it's a little better now. So we'll keep going. The last time she had been out in the world, her life had dramatically and irrevocably changed. She lost her leg, her only blood relative, and almost her life. Inside these walls, she was safe. Outside, she was vulnerable to the perils of an unmerciful world. Ari's heart was jackhammering in her chest, but Val was in danger. She needed Ari's help, and precious minutes were ticking away as Ari stood there deliberating. The image of the madly spinning grandfather clock in Alvaro's vision flashed into her mind. Time was quickly running out. I have to do this. There is no choice. Suck it up and adapt. Soren took hold of her slightly shaking hand and leaned his head against her forearm. "Don't go, Ari," he pleaded. "Let's go tell someone else. Then they can go after Val." "No, little man," she said, knowing that she'd never allow anyone else near the shades. "It's gotta be me. It's my fault Val's out there. I have to clean up my own messes." She knelt down to look into his frightened eyes. "I'll go get Val and bring her back safe and sound before anyone even has to know that she and I left." "But what if you don't come back?" he whimpered, his little chest hitching as he tried to fight back the tears. He was just as scared of the outside world as she was. Ari brought him into a tight hug, trying to give him as much comfort as she could. "I will always come back to you," she promised. "We're family, remember?" His arms tightened around her. More and more precious minutes were ticking by, but she couldn't bear to leave him like this. "I need you to be brave, okay? Can you do that for me?" she said into his ear. I need your courage to help me do what I need to do. He drew back and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. My courage can help you? Ari nodded. I can use all the courage I can get right now, she said honestly. He thought it over, then nodded, shoring up all the courage he could muster, and she couldn't have been any more proud of her little minion. She gave him another tight hug, and she noticed his energy melding into her and giving her strength, just as Cam's did. Thank you, Soren. I love you so much. I love you too, Ari. Okay, enough. Letting go of Soren, she stood back up and looked around the garage for anything she could use. Ari didn't know how far away the shades were taking Val, and she didn't want to use up all her energy sifting, so she had to think of another option. She looked over all the cars, thinking that maybe she could use one of them, but she'd never driven before. Then her eyes locked onto the motorcycle by the far wall. She thought about the motocross bike that Adam had given her back at Paradise Glades. Riding a motorcycle shouldn't be that much different, should it? Whose motorcycle is that? Ari asked Soren as she made her way across the garage. It's Wyatt's, Soren said as he followed after her. He doesn't like anyone touching it, he insisted nervously as Ari came closer to the sleek black Yamaha street bike with a helmet resting on the back. It was parked by a work table full of tools and various mechanical parts. I'm only borrowing it, Ari said as she inspected the bike, and I promise I'll take real good care of it, she assured him. Except for all the buttons and dials, it didn't seem too different from her old motocross bike. I need a key, she said, looking for a spare somewhere, figuring Wyatt kept the original with him. In there, Soren said, pointing to a door on the back wall. That's where they keep all the spare keys for the cars and stuff. Ari went over to the door and opened it to find a closet. It had a large wooden key cabinet hanging in it, where the labeled keys for the various vehicles hung on hooks. She found the spare key for the Yamaha, and noticed that Wyatt luckily kept his riding gloves and leather jacket in the closet as well. Taking the black leather jacket off its hook, she put it on and was surprised to find that it fit reasonably well. Grabbing the key, she put it in the jacket's pocket, and then got the gloves and brought them back to the work table by the bike. She knew from her motocross bike that the cold engine needed to be warmed up before it was ridden, so she made sure the bike was in neutral, put the key in the ignition, and turned it on. Nothing happened. Crap. She looked at the various buttons and dials and noticed a red switch on the right handlebar. Taking a guess, she flicked the switch to the icon that didn't have an X going through it. She tried the ignition again, and the bike hummed to life. Sweet. While the bike warmed up, Ari looked through the toolbox on the work table to find something that she could use as a weapon. Deciding on a Phillips head screwdriver, she put it in the saddle pouch attached to her shorts that Ellie had designed for her. Thank you, Ellie. After uncinching the fabric at the hem of her shorts to turn them into pants, she put on the helmet. After putting on the gloves, she got on the bike. Straddling it, she kicked back the kickstand and tried to get a feel for the weight of the bike. It was a lot heavier than her old one. She remembered reading something about how you were supposed to lean with motorcycles on turns, as opposed to leaning in the opposite direction as with a dirt bike. Gotta remember that. Walking the bike over to the closest garage door, she lifted up the visor of her helmet and asked Soren to push the button to open the door. Soren quickly did as he was asked, and then ran back over to her. Ari! He shouted over the sound of the rising door and the hum of the engine. Promise you'll come back. He held out his pinky finger towards her. She leaned down and locked her pinky around his. I promise, she said solemnly. He nodded, believing in her completely. Be brave, little man, she said before letting go and straightening back up. Looking ahead, she put the visor back down, squeezed the clutch, put the bike into first gear with her foot, and tested the friction zone by easing the throttle forward. Getting a feel for the machine, she eased out into the rain and zeroed in on Val's energy signature. She rode off down the driveway, kicked it into second gear, and went through the gate Val had left open and into the storm. Soren watched as Ari sped away on Wyatt's bike and had to fight the impulse to run screaming after her, begging her to come back. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he twisted the bottom of his shirt in his hands. He needed her to be safe. He needed her to come back. He needed her. I have to be brave. She wants me to be brave. Someone entered the garage, and his heart nearly stopped. He sighed in relief when he realized it was just Skylar. Her hair was still wet, but she had changed into different clothes. He saw that she had tried to reapply the Egyptian kohl around her eyes. It wasn't as good as when Ari did it, but he had to smile at his sister's stubborn defiance. Their grandma Mara had told them to wash their faces when she had first seen them. Skylar had tried to explain why they were wearing the kohl, but Grandma Mara had only scoffed and said that it was all nonsense and that they were perfectly safe. She told them that the virus didn't hurt people like them. Un momento, por favor. Coughing fit. Soren didn't know if he believed her or not, but he didn't want to make her mad at him either, so he had washed it off. Skylar didn't care. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her what she could or couldn't do, and he always envied that about her. Skylar had always been braver than he was, but not today. Today was his turn to be brave. "Did you tell Ari?" Skylar asked as she ran over to him, her wild, wet hair making damp patches around her shoulders. Soren nodded. "She borrowed Wyatt's motorcycle and she's going after Val. She promised she'd bring Val home real quick, before anyone even knows what's happened." Skylar came up beside him and looked out the open doorway towards the gate, and he knew that she was as worried for Ari as much as he was. He took her hand, trying to give her some of his braveness. "She'll come back," he whispered. "She promised that she'd always come back. She pinky promised." "Nothing breaks a pinky promise." Skylar nodded, but he knew that she was thinking about how their mommy and daddy never came back. "Ari's different. I know it," he insisted. After a couple minutes, oh man, I can't get rid of this darn cough. After a couple minutes, they got tired of waiting and decided to push the buttons to close the garage doors. Then Soren remembered that Ari would need to get back in when she returned with Val, so he ran back and pushed one of the buttons to open it again. Just as the twins were leaving the garage, they saw Blake coming down the hallway. Their uncle's eyes lit up with a wicked gleam. "So, there you two are. What kind of mischief have my little niece and nephew been up to in the garage?" Uh-oh. With an inquisitive tilt of his head, Blake's eyes locked on Soren's. "Uh-oh. Why, uh-oh, little nephew?" Soren was practically shaking with fear as he tried to think about anything other than Ari. "Ari?" Blake said with a satisfied smirk. "What has Miss Ari been up to?" To calm himself, Soren concentrated as hard as he could on the different folds he would have to use to make an origami elephant. He didn't want to go back to the lonely place in his head, where he blocked everyone out to be safe, but he would if it meant helping Ari. Blake's brow creased in frustration when he realized he wouldn't be getting anything more from Soren. He turned to Skylar. "Why is your hair wet, little niece?" "I just took a shower," Skylar said confidently. She was always better at lying than Soren. "I see you put that junk back on your face," Blake said with a mean scowl. "It's not junk, it's magic," Skylar insisted. Blake gave her a piercing gaze, but she must have been doing the same thinking trick as Soren, because Blake turned back to him. "You know, Claudia was telling us about what you and Ari did today with the portal. We were hoping that the two of you could give us a demonstration." Soren continued to ignore him as he kept thinking of the different folds and the feel of the crispness of the paper in his hands. Blake's eyes snapped back over to Skylar. "Ari's gone? When did she leave?" "Oh no!" Soren glared at Skylar, who looked back with scared, apologetic eyes. She didn't mean to think about it. They had to do something. Ari needed more time. Soren flicked his eyes towards the door they had left open to the garage, and Skylar knew what he wanted to do, so she went invisible. Blake figured it out too late and was caught off guard when Skylar pushed him from behind, causing him to fall through the doorway and land on his hands and knees. Soren slammed the door closed, and just as he finished sealing it, the door shuddered as Blake began pounding against it, making the twins jump back at the ferocity of his anger. "Open the door right now, you little brats!" Blake shouted. "That should give Ari a little more time." "Come on," Soren said, grabbing Skylar's hand. They ran away from the sounds of their uncle's threats and insults, only to be stopped short when they turned the corner and collided with Alvaro, his eyes wild and frantic. "Where's Ari?" Riding in the rain was much harder than Ari anticipated. She had to go slow while leaning into the turns to keep the bike balanced, and had to try and stay in the tire shadows of the cars in front of her for better traction. Mercifully, the rain had downgraded from a downpour to a steady drizzle, but she was still cold and wet, and even though her new leg wasn't able to feel the wetness of the rain, she could still feel the chill and the heaviness of the fabric around it. It was a bittersweet sensation, and having any sensation in her right leg at all was still bizarre for her. She kept following the path of Val's energy signature, which was accompanied by someone she didn't recognize, and the pitch-black paths of the shades surrounding them. It made Ari's skin crawl and her heart palpitate with fear, but she carried on, fixated on her purpose. The paths led Ari into a sketchy part of the city. The closer she came to the shades, the worse the feelings of repulsion became, almost to the point where she thought she was going to be physically sick. When the feeling was on the brink of becoming overwhelming, Ari saw the paths leading to and coming out of a van matching Skylar's description, parked on the side of the road. Slowing down, Ari decided to park out of sight in an alley about a block away from the van. She rested the bike beside a large dumpster under the scant cover of a rusty fire escape. Taking the key out of the ignition, she got off the bike and had to catch her breath. There were so many shades nearby that it was hard for her to overcome the mind-numbing fear in order to focus. Val must be in a whole nest of them. Ari had to get control of herself before her fear attracted the shades' attention, like moths to a flame. As Ari tried to calm her racing heart, she remembered back to when she had met Helena Devane in New York. The beautiful redhead had the opposite effect of the shades. Her energy was pleasing and attractive instead of repulsive. When Ari had realized the effect Helena was having on the people around her, Ari was able to shield herself from it. Maybe I could do that with the shades. Taking off the bike helmet and placing it on the back of the bike, she took a deep breath and focused on shielding herself. The fear and nausea completely disappeared, which was a relief, but now she had no way of sensing if they were near. She had a choice to make. She could either protect herself, but essentially give herself a handicap, or she could suck it up and adapt. Ari let out a gusty sigh of resignation. Suck it up and adapt. At least for now. At the sound of raucous laughter and unsteady footsteps, Ari pressed herself against the wall, concealing herself from view. Looking through the dumpster, she saw a group of intoxicated delinquents stumbling past the opening of the alleyway. None of them were shades, but they certainly looked like the kind of crowd they'd hang out with. As soon as they passed, Ari pulled the hood from her shirt out from under the leather jacket and put it over her head. Then she silently made her way to where she could see the van. The paths of Val, her companion, and the shades moved on past the empty van down the street, and then disappeared around a corner. I'm about to have another coughing fit. One moment. Ari went back to the bike and tried to hide it under some old newspapers and boxes she found in the dumpster, hoping it would still be there by the time she came back with Val. Coming out from the alley, Ari made sure the hood was pulled down low enough to sufficiently hide her face. She continued to follow their paths a block down the street. She turned the corner and stealthily hid in a recessed doorway. The paths led towards an old rundown factory building. The crumbling brick facade was covered in graffiti tags and crude images. The few window panes that weren't broken were coated in a thick layer of grime. That was where the nest of shades was. The place was practically pulsing with evil. The paths went around to the back of the building, but she saw the delinquents she had seen earlier and a few other stragglers going in the front. Focusing in on the door where the people were filing through, Ari saw a shade who had possessed the body of a huge bruiser of a guy who seemed to be working as a bouncer. He was checking something the size of a business card that people were flashing at him to get in. Looking through the wall, Ari saw a female shade handing something out to everyone coming in. Concentrating, she tried to control her enhanced hearing to pick up what she was saying. It was hard to filter out the rhythmic thumping of the trance music playing inside and the background noise of the delirious crowd. But by watching the shade's lips, Ari was able to discern that she was repeating herself to everyone who passed. First one's on the house. What have you gotten yourself into, Val? Ari tried to locate Val's energy, but there were too many people and shades in there to get a lock on it. After retracing her steps back out to the road she was on before, Ari went down another block or so she could try to get to the back of the building without being seen. Soren and Skylar were following Alvaro through a part of Sion's keep they had never been in before. Soren had thought that they had explored everywhere, but he was obviously mistaken. Normally, discovering an unexplored place would have been an exciting adventure. Soren was too worried about Ari to enjoy it. "Where are we going, Alvaro?" Skylar asked, just as curious as Soren was. "Up to the roof," Alvaro said shortly. "But this isn't the way to the roof. It's back that way," she said, pointing behind them. "We're not going to the greenhouse. We're going to go see old Enzo." The twins stopped in their tracks and looked at each other nervously. Neither one of them wanted to see that crazy old man with the scary wide eyes. "But why him?" Skylar shouted after Alvaro. Alvaro glanced back over his shoulder at them, then slowed his pace when he realized they weren't following anymore. "Because," he said impatiently, "I have a gut feeling that's who we need to talk to right now. The three of us." "When I have a feeling in my gut, it usually means I have to go number 2, Skylar said sagely. "Look, we're running out of time. Do you want to help Val and Ari, or what?" Alvaro said, looking at them like he was prepared to drag them up to the roof if he had to. "Yes, we do," Soren said definitively before Skylar could protest any further. He turned to his sister. "We need to be brave for Ari." Skylar let out a defeated huff and nodded. "All right. Let's go see old Enzo. Alvaro led them to an elevator that looked like the one that went to the greenhouse. Alvaro pressed the button and the doors slid open right away. The twins followed him in, and Sora noticed a bumblebee flying after them. It was having a hard time flying because it was wet, but it managed to circle Alvaro's head a couple times. Then Alvaro held up his finger like a perch, and the bee actually landed on it, looking right at Alvaro. "I know, we're coming," he said to the bee. Soren glanced over at Skylar, who looked just as amazed and confused as he felt. "Did you just talk to that bee?" she asked Alvaro in disbelief. "Don't worry about it," Alvaro said, just as the elevator stopped and the doors opened. Soren saw that they were at the end of a glass hallway. The bee flew out, and Alvaro quickly followed after it. "We're going into the upside-down fishbowl," Skylar whispered as they stepped out of the elevator. With the rain coming down, Soren couldn't really see what was outside of the glass. The doors to the upside-down fishbowl hissed open with a warm rush of air, and it smelled like dirt, plants, and soup. Normally, Soren didn't like getting near Alvaro because his emotions were so intense, and he always seemed frustrated. But as they came through the door, he couldn't help edging as close to Alvaro as he could get. Soren felt like he was entering a Grimm's fairy tale world, a strange and unsettling place, full of both promise and unseen peril. Skylar grabbed Soren's hand and squeezed it when they saw old Enzo sitting in a chair by a fire pit. The soupy smell was coming from a black witch's cauldron hanging over the spectral smoky remains of a dying fire. The old man in the strange clothes sat there staring ahead with his eyes all white and scary. He was so still, Soren thought he might be dead. In fact, Soren was so scared that it was getting hard to keep his legs moving forward. Suddenly, Skylar's arm shot out in front of him and pointed up towards the branches of one of the white trees that grew around the place. "Look, it's Armand!" she shouted, waving at the bird excitedly. "Hi, Armand. Remember me?" The bird was hard to see at first amidst the green leaves of the trees, but then he saw the bright yellow head start to bob up and down. "Hello," the bird squawked. Soren liked the bird who could talk like a person, and he felt a little less scared. The old man cleared his throat, making Soren and Skylar jump at the unexpected noise. Old Enzo started blinking, and his eyes changed from white to normal. Well, almost normal. "Oh, wow!" Skylar said excitedly, as she let go of Soren's hand and came closer to Enzo's chair. "Your eyes are different colors. That's so cool!" Enzo's face broke into a friendly smile as he focused on Skylar, and then brought out a pair of old-fashioned glasses from one of his jacket pockets and put them on. "Why, thank you," Enzo said to Skylar. "I'm glad you think so." On closer inspection, Soren thought the old man kind of looked like George, and the man didn't stare at Skylar's birthmark like most people who first meet her do. "This is George's daddy and Alvaro's grandpa. He's not so scary." Enzo turned to Alvaro, his face becoming serious. I saw Mara's boy running out of the garage and cursing to high heaven. That boy has never seemed right to me." "He's not," Skylar said with disgust. "He's a mean bully." "What have you seen, boy?" Enzo asked Alvaro. "The snake won," Alvaro said. "And a darkness, like an oily pitch-black smoke, is surrounding Ari and Val. I went to go warn them, but the twins said Val went off with some people in a van, and Ari went after them on Wyatt's bike." Soren could feel Alvaro's fear, and he had to hug himself to keep from shaking. He couldn't stand the thought of Ari with scary snakes and yucky darkness. "They're in grave danger, Grandpa," Alvaro continued. "You need to find them before it's too late." "Did you tell this to anyone else?" Enzo asked. Alvaro shook his head. "I had a feeling that I should come here first." "We must act quickly then," he said, rubbing at the white whiskers on his chin. "The van that Val got into, what did it look like?" Enzo asked Soren and Skylar. "It was white, with no windows except for the front, and it had a picture of an ugly devil man with horns." Skylar made her fingers look like horns on the top of her head. "There were words above and below it. I saw the word the, and the other two words started with C, but they were hard words and I couldn't read them fast enough." Enzo nodded. "Okay, which way did they go?" "They went out the back gate and turned right," Skylar said. Enzo nodded again. Then he looked towards where Armand sat on the tree branch and whistled through his teeth. He held up his forearm, and Armand flew down and gently landed on it. Enzo lovingly stroked the bird's feathers and then took out some sunflower seeds from one of his pockets, and the bird eagerly ate them. "I need you to fly strong and true, my friend. We need to help the pretty girl," Enzo cooed. "Pretty girl, Armand said, bobbing his head as though he understood. Enzo lowered his arm and let Armand climb down onto his knee. Then he sat back, taking his glasses off again and putting them back in his pocket. And suddenly his eyes went all wide again. Soren and Skylar gasped. Armand froze for a second, then started madly flapping his wings and took off towards the top of the dome. The bird went straight to one of the triangular pieces that was propped open and flew out into the storm. "What's going on?" Skylar asked, still looking where Armand had flown out. "Enzo is controlling the bird. He's going to find Ari and Val and then come back to tell us where they are." Soren looked back at Enzo, sitting there as still as death again, and he knew that he couldn't sit back and wait for something to happen. Ari was in grave danger, according to Alvaro, and Soren knew that the word grave was associated with death. Ari was his family. She had said so. That made her his big sister, and he couldn't let anything happen to her. He couldn't let her disappear. "Stay here with Enzo," Soren whispered to Skylar, letting her know by the look in his eyes that it was important for her to do as he asked. "Where are you going?" she whispered back, glancing over at Alvaro, who was still staring up at the space where Armand had flown through. "I have to save Ari." "I'll go with you." "No, you have to stay here. Blake is going to tell on us, so you have to stay up here with old Enzo and pretend to be me." He took off his skin cuff and put it on Skylar's right forearm. They had figured out a while ago that Gordon and Miles had put tracking chips in their cuffs, in case Skylar went invisible and they couldn't find her. "Please, Skylar, I have to do this. I could feel it." Skylar looked him in the eyes and knew that she didn't want him to go, but she nodded anyway. She had learned to trust in Soren's feelings, and she wanted Ari back as much as he did. Soren gave his sister a tight hug before darting away. "Hey, where are you going?" Alvaro said, making as though he was going to run after him. But before he could move more than a couple steps, he suddenly froze, and his eyes became unfocused. Soren worriedly glanced back before going through the sliding door. "Go now!" Skylar urged while frantically motioning with her hands for him to move. "While he's having a vision!" Soren gave her a quick nod, then dashed through the opening door and into the glass hallway. I gotta be brave. And that was the end of chapter 25. We have completed it. It is done. We are successful. Oh, my goodness gracious. I'm going to end that here, and I'm probably going to go on to chapter 26. Thank you for joining us. Till next time, peace.